All right, hello everyone. Thanks for tuning back in once again to the original Queen Ahmadiyyah Shakur show. I'm your host, Queen Ahmadiyyah Shakur, and this is another dose of your daily vitamin. Honey, Diddy has done it again. Okay, Diddy has just been hit with two more charges in his criminal case, and this is a month before he's due to go to trial. All right, talk about being a disgrace to hip hop mogul, honey. It's hard out here for a pimp like Diddy. Please pay attention. Now, they say that he's been accused of trafficking by force, fraud, and coercion and transportation to engage in prostitution. But now he's facing five charges for his trial, which, by the way, is due to start on May the 5th of or in New York. Okay, so the updated indictment accuses Diddy of one count of racketeering conspiracy, two counts of trafficking by force, fraud, and coercion, and two counts of transportation to engage in prostitution. Now, mind you, this is all pertaining to victim number two. And we already know because they've already told us, even though we already had figured it out ourselves, that victim number one is, of course, Cassie. Okay. And so, with that all being said, it's still going bad for Diddy, honey, at the end of the day. So, let's talk about it because I'm going to share my screen and go to the legal docs. This is just 2 pages. I'm not going over the superseding indictment. We don't really need to do all of that because, hey, it's basically summed up right here in this 2 page letter that the acting U.S. attorney sent to the judge. So let's talk about it. Dear Judge Subramanian, the government respectfully submits this letter regarding the third indictment returned yesterday in the above referenced case by a grand jury sitting in this district. Now, the third indictment contains three substantive changes to the charged offenses. First, count four charges an additional substantive count of trafficking by force, fraud, or coercion with respect to victim two. Now, victim two was previously identified as a victim of trafficking in count one of the second indictment. Second, count one has been amended to include a special or a second special sentencing factor related to the new trafficking offense charged in count four. Third, the third indictment charges the Mann Act in two separate counts in counts 3 and 5, covering conduct for victim one and victim two, respectively. Now, the second indictment previously charged this conduct as a single Mann Act offense. In addition, the language of count one contains two non substantive changes clarifying that the defendant kidnapped and carried and displayed a firearm to female victim and that the defendant dangled a female victim over an apartment balcony. The government has already produced all Rule 16 discovery and Jinx Act materials in its possession associated with the third indictment and does not expect the third indictment to affect existing pretrial deadlines. The government respectfully requests that the defendant has arraigned the government respectfully requests that the defendant be arraigned on the third indictment at the final pretrial conference scheduled for April the 25th of 2025. Respectfully submitted, Matthew Podolsky, who is the acting United States attorney. Now, I want you to pay attention to what he said about the sentencing. Okay, in the second point that he made, he said count one has been amended to include a second special sentencing factor related to the new trafficking offense charged in count four. Why is that important? That's important because when they say a special sentencing factor, well, that basically pertains to the nefariousness of the charges. Okay. And after that, they go on to talk about how he supposedly allegedly kidnapped, carried, and displayed a firearm to the female victim, and that the defendant also dangled a female victim over an apartment balcony. And we already know about that. It was a 17-foot balcony where he dangled Cassie's friend. Okay, so with that all being said, this may present aggravating factors. So aggravating factors would mean that he gets, of course, a stiffer punishment. Okay, so that's clearly what they're asking for. I find it also interesting. So Diddy, it looks like it's all going bad for you, honey. And here's the thing: just when Diddy was trying to celebrate his little small victories that he got, the Fed said, nope, don't even think about it. We're about to come hard. Okay, we're about to come right back at you. And not only that, in the superseded indictment, they talk about confiscating his property, things that are in his name, things that are belong to him directly or indirectly, and all of these things, Diddy is going to be flat broke. Okay, even if he does beat the case, which I don't believe that he will, he'll probably get at least 4 to 5 years for time served, in my opinion. Now, but even if he does beat the case for any reason, Diddy's going to be broke, I do believe, because they're taking his assets. They're talking about taking his property, his assets, his money, and all of these things or whatever. And if Janice Combs thinks that she's going to keep the things that she has in her name, well, if they're able to find out and prove that those things are really Diddy's and that she's just holding her name on them to protect them from being confiscated or whatever, or for them being lost in his civil suits with all these people suing him and all this cash he's going to have to pay out for the people that actually win their civil cases, the people that are actual victims, the people who have real life stories, the ones who aren't making things up like Adria English and others. Well, and that's not going to fly, okay? That's not going to fly, Mama Combs. You're going to have to give it up, honey. So anyway, what do y'all think about it? Because what I find interesting also is that I told you all Joe Tacopina, who is or was ASAP Rocky's lawyer who helped him beat the case. He came out and spoke a few days ago about Tony Buzbee, but he was also just on an interview with Vlad TV, and he had some things to say about Mr. Buzbee's nefarious self filing these frivolous, fraudulent charges, in my opinion, against Jay-Z and Diddy. Okay, so I'm going to go to the video of that. Everyone, please like and share, and I don't have permission to use this footage, so I will be using an overlay. Okay, so I'm going to share my screen. All right, here we go. So now let's hear what Mr. Joe Tacopina has to say about Mr. Buzbee.
The whole case was dropped, and now Jay-Z is suing Tony Buzbee and the woman. And from what I understand, Busby is no longer allowed to actually practice in New York because there's a ruling that came from the Committee of Grievances for the Southern District of New York, which basically investigates complaints of attorney misconduct, and they found that to be true. So now he had to drop like 7 other lawsuits in New York because he's not legally allowed to practice anymore. Were you surprised that actually happened?
Not even a little bit. Not even a little bit. Knowing what I know and knowing how he's conducted himself, knowing what he did to Jay. Look, even what he Diddy. I mean, Diddy's got so many things going on right now, so the ramifications are different. Jay-Z is just a terrific person. He's not well known by many. He's a terrific person. He's got a wife who's an amazing woman, and he's got children. And imagine you wait, and his children aren't babies where they can't read. They're children that understand what's out there. And imagine waking up one day and your dad's being called the rapist of a child. It's a disgusting allegation. It's a horrific allegation. And you do not make that allegation as a lawyer unless you are 100% sure that happened, because you're hurting someone's life, you're hurting someone's children. And it's despicable to me that any lawyer could actually do that without having a certainty. Okay. Clearly this lawyer didn't care. I'm glad to see Jay fighting back, but that's Jay. That's Jay. That's Rock Nation. They're cut from a different breed, and they're cut from a different cloth, and they're from Brooklyn. Like Jay's from Bed-Stuy. So that team there is powerful. That team is strong, and they're more than powerful and strong. I've been working with them for years. Desiree Perez is like the CEO there. They don't suffer fools. They don't take nonsense from anyone. And this was something that some people would have kowtowed to and been like, "Oh my God, how horrible!" They fought back, and look. I told anyone who would listen when I was interviewed about that it's not true. It's nonsense. And if you know anything about Jay-Z, that's the last thing that would have ever happened. Putting that aside, they pushed back hard, and look at what happened. The woman recanted. She at one point, there's a tape recording, by the way, where she blamed Buzbee for saying include Jay, but she recanted. I mean, more importantly, she recanted. How do you bring a lawsuit with a woman with that type of credibility? She had some issues to begin with. Number one, I think they took advantage of those issues, the lawyers, to try and get her thinking that Jay would say, "Oh, okay, I don't want to be Diddy again. I don't want to have this happen. What do you need, 20 million? Okay, boom, yeah, no problem."
Okay, I want you all to pay attention, because isn't that exactly what the Queen told you, beloveds? Make sure you remember that you heard that here first. That's exactly what I said. Busby had no intentions of ever going to court with that civil suit against Jay-Z and Diddy or possibly any of the others. He thought once he made his demands and came out there and held that bogus press conference where he was using numerology, playing with gematria, and talking about 120 people, 60 men and 60 women, little did we know at the time that he'd done the same exact thing with the Travis Scott situation about the Astro World incident. He came out talking about he had 120 plus clients. But I told y'all, didn't I? I went and dug up the receipts and proved to y'all that he is probably a Mason and that he was absolutely using numerology, okay, to play these little games. Now, so this attorney right here, who's a top attorney, by the way, a high profile attorney, he represents many celebrities, not just A$AP Rocky, very credible, but he's come out and said himself that Busby is basically, he didn't call him a dirt bag, but I'm just going to go out on a limb and call him a dirt bag. What kind of attorney would do the things that Busby has done and act in the way to which Busby has acted? Okay, I'm glad that he said it. So when you have people on YouTube telling you that all these attorneys are saying this and trying to act like, you know, that Busby's not a piece of ish, okay, acting like Busby's on the up and up and doing such a thorough job, please don't believe the hype, because the real attorneys, the top attorneys, this is what they're actually saying, okay? And I find it also egregious. Busby, in my opinion, needs to be disbarred. But let's keep listening.
No, doesn't happen that way. He stood on principle, and he won on principle. And bravo for him, because it takes a set of onions to be able to do that, and he did it. And it's outrageous. I get angry and also sad when I think about that case, because, you know, like, there's a beautiful family that was also involved in that did nothing to deserve that. But, you know, all's well that ends well, and that's important.
Well, but look, I've dealt with a lot of lawsuits, and I've had the people that sued me just lie flat out, and the lawyers just repeat the lies in filings to the judge. And they said, well, my client said this and this, and from my understanding, I think they're credible, and it goes forward. And ultimately, I feel like the way the legal system is set up, do lawyers really lose their licenses for, you know, filing lawsuits where their client is lying to them?
No. If they have, look, as long as they're acting in good faith, right? If you know someone's lying and you go forward with it, you can lose your license. You could be suspended. I think the claim here is this guy didn't even meet her. This lawyer, Buzbee, didn't meet her before he filed this complaint. This guy didn't do any investigation. I mean, you're claiming someone's a child rapist. Dan, before you go make that public filing, you make sure you get some facts to stand on. So I think that's what this is more about. Not about, you know, the lawyer was deceived by the client. The client's lying, and therefore the lawyer's in trouble. Of course not. If that were the case, no one would ever be a lawyer.
Okay, please pay attention. I also told you that, yes, at the end of the day, I did tell you that Tony Busby filed that lawsuit against Jay-Z, sent that demand letter in October, okay, and then never even met little Miss Jane Doe until December. And I told you that he couldn't have vetted her, okay? And then, like this lawyer says, how can you think this person is credible? But these attorneys, they were obviously trying to exploit her, okay, because of her mental incompetence and just thinking that they could just use her to get a quick bag. Busby had no intentions ever, in my opinion, of going into the courtroom. That's why he never filed for Pro Hoc Vice in the beginning, okay, because he thought he was just going to get a quick settlement. And he definitely thought with somebody as big as Jay-Z and married to Beyonce and all of that, and having the ties that Jay-Z's had with Diddy in the past, that definitely he's thinking Jay-Z's going to come out and just offer him up a settlement. But it backfired on him, and now he's been exposed.
Because, you know, we'd be all, you know, our livelihood would be subject to the you know, the veracity of clients, of every client. If the client's lying and the lawyer presents that lie, even though they thought they were acting in good faith, they get kneecapped. There'd be no lawyers left. So there has to be a knowledge from the lawyer. They have to be not acting in good faith.
Yeah, I just think that the system is set up where it.
Okay, so I'm going to stop that right there. But at the end of the day, I think it's fair to say that Busby is, you know, he's just no good, and he may need to lose his license, okay, if they can prove that he didn't vet this woman and that he, in fact, coerced her into naming Jay-Z. All right, so anyway, You know, when they spoke to Diddy's team about all of this, basically they said this is all BS, like they continue to say. Okay, the hip hop mogul has denied all of the allegations against him, and his legal team argued that the charges were based on consensual acts, not coercion. They say these are not new allegations or new accusers. Mr. Combs' legal team told CBS News, the BBC's US partner, that these are the same individuals, former long-term girlfriends who were involved in consensual relationships. This was their private sex life defined by consent, not coercion. Now, a grand jury probe indicted Mr. Combs last year on charges of racketeering, conspiracy, as trafficking, and transportation to engage in prostitution. These two new charges bring total federal charges against him to 5. Now, the court document does not provide specifics about the new offenses, but prosecutors allege that they stem from a grand jury investigation. You see, the original charges of trafficking and engaging in prostitution filed against Diddy in 2024 tie the charges to allegations from 2009 and to 2018 and relate to a different victim. Now, they say a significant portion of the most severe allegations against the rapper relate to the racketeering conspiracy charge, which includes accusations of kidnapping, drugging, and coercing women into sexual activities, sometimes using firearms or threats of violence. The charge includes details from a raid on his Los Angeles mansion where police found supplies they said were intended for use in orgies known as freak-offs, including drugs and more than 1,000 bottles of baby oil. Okay, so with that all being said, of course, Diddy denies all the allegations and wants to have his day in court. So what do you all think about this? Honey, Diddy has done it again. Okay, Diddy can't win for losing. He gets one small victory, and then the feds are like, nope, not so fast. Okay, we're coming right back at you, hitting you with 2 more charges. So, you know, I'm just anxious for this trial to go ahead and get started so we can see what's really going on at the end of the day. And, you know, the civil cases, those will be settled and resolved or what have you after the criminal case, because that's how that works. So more charges for Diddy, and we'll see how it fares. And, you know, I have to really agree with Joe Tacopina, because you cannot have lawyers like Tony Buzby out here chasing ambulances, out here just trying to get money and just making up stuff, you know, just telling lies or whatever. And for anybody, and I'm going to say this again, who's still thinking that Little Miss Joe was telling the truth, I don't know, but you probably just may want to think about having your head checked, okay? At the end of the day, and all these people telling all these lies, it's really not good for business. And by that I mean it's not good for the actual victims who are going through things or have gone through things and still suffer from the trauma and all of those things. I don't think that Diddy is innocent. I think that Diddy did many of the things that they've accused him of, but unfortunately these people who choose to lie and clout chase and just try to make a name for themselves and get money and all of that, these people are really, really going to make it difficult for the jury to know what to believe and what not to believe, because that's exactly what's happened to the court of public opinion. You see, many of us don't even know what the hell to believe anymore because of all the lies that have come out and that continue to come out. Okay, this is all causing chaos. And I do believe that some of these people have, in fact, been paid to act as agents of chaos. That's exactly what I do believe. Okay, so anyway, you all drop me a comment, honey, to let me know what you think about this latest indictment. Love you all. Hope you enjoy the rest of this day. And I will talk to you all again soon. Peace.